everyone, and welcome back to my channel, Treehouse Permaculture. Today we're at the urban farm, and this is the main garden. I've been gardening in this garden at my parents' house since I was about 10, and we've been growing all kinds of crops for our family, and this is where I got my start. So every season I turn over this garden along with my farm, and the soil is very rich because it's been enriched with compost for about, I would say, almost 20 years now. So we have deep, rich soil, and this soil compared to our farm is clay soil. So it has more minerals, and we don't have to add as many minerals to the soil to grow nice root crops and big leafy greens. So what we did to this garden in the summer is we covered the whole area with that tarp over there, and we left the tarp on for a month to kill all of the remaining crops. I weed whacked it all down to flatten the tarp, and you can see very little of the old crops or the weeds survived. We do have some nut sedge, otherwise known as nut grass here. So we will still have to pull some of these weeds out, but it drastically reduces the amount of labor we have to do. And this is a way that we can do no-till gardening. We don't have to turn the soil, we just put the tarp on, killed the weeds, and then we raked all of the matter that was left over into the paths, as you can see. And then we'll stomp this organic matter down to create a nice dense mulch in the paths, reducing any other weeds that come up. And for the beds, what we'll do is we'll lay down some compost as a layer. It can be a ½ inch to an inch thick. We don't need a lot of compost here because it is very rich in organic matter, but I find that the weed seeds have a hard time coming up when there's just a layer of compost on top, because the compost has heated up and it doesn't contain any seeds. So the only seeds that will germinate in that top layer of soil is the crops that we're sowing. I'll also go over how we use a seeder to sow our crops, so we don't have to bend over and sprinkle seeds into little trenches like we used to. So I'll show you how I layer the compost on, and then we use the seeder so we don't have to turn the soil or disturb the soil. And this keeps the microbe community intact. It'll keep any mycorrhizae or beneficial fungal networks intact. So we are maximizing the soil microbes that break down the organic matter and turn it into nutrients for our plants. We just laid down all this compost in probably 10 minutes, as you could see. And my method was grabbing that big scoop, and as I lay it on the bed, just kind of throwing it to the side so it goes down the row. So I'm not laying it down really thick, it's actually covering a larger area down the row. And so now we have pine straw mulch in the paths, and we have this nice compost in the beds, and this will suppress any other weeds that try to come up. And my last method of keeping the weeds down is sowing about 4 to even 6 rows of greens in these beds to create a closed canopy within the bed, preventing any weeds from coming up in between the rows. So next I'll show you guys how I use my Earthway seeder. They're not sponsoring me, by the way, but I highly recommend a seeder if you are seeding a whole garden. It is much more efficient and you don't have to bend over, and it precisely seeds the beds to the density that you need for a successful growing season. Okay, now I have my Earthway seeder, and this is a mechanical seeder that I use instead of hand sowing these days. It has a hopper in the top that you add the seeds. Here I have lettuce seeds, and you install a seed plate appropriate for the size of seed that you're using. The hopper uses this wheel that is connected to the plate to spin the seeds up into these little seed indentations, and then the seed is taken into this tube down here and dropped into this little plow. This plow creates a furrow or a small trench that drops the seed at an appropriate depth, adjusted by this knob here, and it has the seed depth in a chart right here. So we are at a 1/2 inch, and since we're doing lettuce, we want to loosen this knob, take it up to a 1/4 of an inch, and then the seeds will drop out of here and a chain will drag behind, closing the furrow all in one action. So this saves us a lot of time. We can sow all these beds in about 10 minutes instead of a 1/2 hour. So I'll show you guys how I seed these beds super quickly so we can move on with our day and keep growing elsewhere. And just like that, I seeded that row. Now I'll probably do one more lettuce row, an alternate row, because we don't want 2 rows of lettuce right next to each other. Staggering your crops like this and separating a row of lettuce by a row of lettuce with maybe arugula will prevent any diseases or pests in this row of lettuce to get to this row of lettuce. So I'm going to alternate my rows now. If you hit an obstacle, you can just lift the plow for a moment and then put it back in. Debris gets caught on the plow, simply remove it and continue going. All right. And there we go. I just sowed 2 beds of lettuce, about 4 rows per bed, and so it'll come up super dense, not allowing any other weeds to come up in between. This took all of 2 minutes, where it may have taken 10 minutes in the past, seeding by hand. So I highly recommend a seeder. This was only $100. More expensive seeders can be upwards of $700. So this is a great place to start if you're starting a bigger home garden where you need a little help seeding your rows. So thanks for joining us. We'll give you an update on this garden when all of this stuff is germinating in the next couple weeks. And with all the rain from the hurricanes lately, we'll have no problem with germination, as it's been very overcast. All the beds are staying very moist for the fall vegetables, and it's been less hot, so we're taking advantage of the microclimate of all the storms lately. So stay tuned, guys, and thanks for joining us at the Treehouse Urban Farm today.